So hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the Design Systems Creation, Application, and Value webinar. Now, my name is Chris, and I am the Creative Lead and Content Manager here at Mobile Live. So as such, today's topic is of special appeal to me, and I imagine it is to all of you as well. Now, whether you're talking about an organization or an individual, evidence always points to the fact that those who are able to consistently elicit the most value are the most successful. This is true whether you're talking about a big brand or just brandy in marketing. Now, the value of a good design system is perhaps its clearest attribute. It brings speed, efficiency, consistency, brand recognition, lower cost, increased margins. However, understanding and diving deeper into design systems, their creation, their application, it takes a special kind of expertise that fortunately we are lucky enough to have with us today. And taking that as my segue, I would like to introduce you to your presenters for today. First, we have Yushin, a UI UX designer and a visual storyteller who specializes in building and scaling human interfaces through design systems and effective design handoff. And we also have Su Young, another UI UX designer and researcher who always designs with the intent of incorporating and aligning user behavior and context to try and create truly exceptional designs. Thank you both for joining me today.
So we welcome everybody.
Hello.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining on this webinar.
Perfect. So we have a great presentation for you today, as well as a Q&A session parked right at the end. So during the presentation, feel free to utilize the chat or that little QA button on the bottom of your screen in that way you don't forget. And hopefully we have time to address everything. But you all are not here to see me. You're here to see these two. So without further ado, over to you, ladies.
So let me share my screen now. Okay, please let me know if you can see the screen. Then we can start.
I think you're good to go.
Yeah, cool. So I'm gonna probably have to disable my video for the best quality of the internet. Okay, so yeah, like Chris said, welcome everyone, and thank you, Chris, for the amazing intro. We're gonna spend the next probably an hour on design system, and you're gonna see a lot of this Lego blocks in our presentation because we couldn't find any better analogy for describing our design process. So, learning from our Lego experience, we all agree that rather than dumping like this, everything on the table, we would love to do some categorizing in the first place. This really helps keeping things stay organized, and we also get to the desired outcomes more easily and more quickly because things work here in a similar way when we're producing the digital experience and products. And a design system actually enables an efficient working process across all the team members, and also it ensures the consistency and cohesion of the experience that we have been delivered. So what's in the design system? Design foundations and layout are the very bottom layer, which drives the overall user experience. And on top of that are the UI elements and components, as well as motion. All of this are the very bottom layer, and this could be specified in design tools like Figma, Adobe XD, and Sketch. On the other hand, design documentation plays a critical role as it communicates to the other team members like dev, QA, and also other team members of our design specs, usage, and no-goes of everything that's in the design inventory. And these are the typical tools that fulfill these needs. Then it enters to the dev stage, where the front-end engineers translate the UI design into dev languages as per their coding standard. And also dev documentation is equally important. And And here, I always love the metaphor where we refer design to the process of cooking a dish. So my personal interpretation will be that the foundations and layout could be the type of cuisine and your guest preferences. On the other hand, UI elements and components will be the ingredients. Design documentation is a recipe book, and the code and dev documentation will guarantee the same taste and presentation can be delivered no matter who's cooking the dish or wherever the kitchen locates. In terms of design system values, there are so many different perspectives which we can talk about it. First of all, it keeps all the team members in the same direction by providing a centralized source of building blocks. Then design that, they are the non-reusable elements that we have created during scaling up the design system or making design changes. Because as design teams, we tend to let go of the small pieces, especially when we encounter larger problems. It could be as simple as an untested button, but all these small pieces and trifles will accumulate along the way until one day we have to pay back the interest. Design consistency, no-brainer. I think it's the most obvious benefit of the design system. And also we get to prototype faster without having to go from scratch every time. On the other hand, we iterate more quickly by reusing the existing components, and we also only have to make adjustments most of the time. Last but not least, accessibility and usability, they will improve in a way that brings a cohesive experience to the user. So this is a screen capture of our team member creating a page with a set of product details card in the same layout. So with the design system, we can actually pull this out within 30 minutes, maybe compared with half day or even longer work before, because we had to make so many design decisions before. So I'm gonna play it. So you see here, this team member, she's actually creating the first card, and she's trying to pull every single design element or component from our library with some minimum changes. And the changes mostly are copy changes as well. So you see the first card is almost done, and then some duplication, some configuration in terms of copy and visual assets. And here you go, it's done. And in terms of responsiveness, everything is pre-configured, and because all the constraints have been set previously. So yeah, so in this way, the work can be minimized in a certain extent. All right, so I hope you all are getting excited about creating your own design system. And in this section, I'm gonna do a detailed breakdown of how you can build a design system from the ground up. First question, who will be involved in the decision of making your design system? So this will be the questions that you're very likely to hear when you're trying to convince the team to spend time and effort on the design system, like how much it costs, how long it will take, how much resource we have to invest, what's the ROI, and who takes care of the design system in the long term. Well, for the decision makers, they're usually interested in how this approach saves time and money. The project leads ask about how a design system improves the current process. And in terms of the execution team, they usually care about what needs to be done and how we can do it. And here are some quick numbers that you can use to tackle these questions and to get the design system idea buy-in across the team. On the other hand, so similar to every great work, it always comes down to people and process eventually. So for a design system, really the designers and developers are the two sides of the coin. So for designers, on one hand, they make sure that the style and elements are consistent and aligned with the brand standard. Also, the designers maintain the accessibility on a component level. On the other hand, the dev team translate the design styles and components into front-end experience that meets the code standard. And all of this is thanks to the design tokens provided by the design team. And as feedback, the dev team could advise the design on the viability of the elements that's being visualized, and also share the existing or open source design components or even patterns that could be adopted directly. So really the collaboration and communication between design and dev is making this coin spinning constantly, and we are able to deliver the right outcomes. So coming to the layers of design system, the brand style guide, the accessibility consideration, and design principles are forming the design requirements together. And these usually come from the business requirement and also our understanding of the end user. And here I would like to mention design principles specifically. So they're very critical step in constructing a design system for your team. And you see this example from Salesforce Lightning on the right side. So design principles are usually, you see a group of short phrases or a group of words, which we put together to actually describe our initial purposes and the ultimate experience we're looking to deliver to the users. But the user do not see them. It's actually your team members do, because design principles are the, I would see it as a tool that we use to have the internal alignment and also guide the team members of who we're building the experience for and what kind of problems that we're trying to solve. The second layer is the design foundations, where we define the design styles, design layout, and some possible effects. And this can be adapted from the brand guide, or it also can be redefined according to your needs for sure. Then it's really important to document these styles into design tokens so that the design and dev team could use a unified naming across and for every design attribute. So all of this will be applied across the elements and components that's coming later. So really the beauty of design, the beauty of design tokens are, they tend to make things super flexible and also trackable, because actually design tokens are simplifying the process of visual changes. So yeah, one typical use case that I would like to mention here is, especially when we're working with multi-branded or even white labeled products, design tokens are really, really useful and critical to make the visual design changes without having to damage the overall experience. So here is an example from Shopify Polaris. So you see their components in their design foundations, it's actually richer than what we have illustrated. So they have illustrations, for example, they have sounds, they have even data visualization. So all of this is used to add a unique personality to the product that you're trying to build, and also guarantee that you provide a unique, usable, and also memorable experience to the end users. Okay, so this is where the real fun begins. So we need to create the building blocks based on the design foundations by visualizing these design elements and components like input, control, navigation, and also other items like the notification or tooltips. So don't forget to define the variants for each of these elements that stands for different states, like hover, focus, read only, or disabled. please also pay attention to the documentation of these elements and components, such as the design specs, the good and undesired usage, and also, if possible, document the character limit and also constraint. The more specified, the better, because really this process will be super helpful for the team collaboration in the future, although it's a little bit too tedious in most of the cases. So this is another example from IBM Carbon I put here. So you see their division of the component is actually much more detailed and specified, because I guess this design system is used to serve a much larger ecosystem of IBM's design and also its digital experience. All right, so on top, the patterns are mixtures of design elements and components. And this could be defined based on the use cases and features that you want to include in the experience. So really the advantage of having the design patterns is that you don't have to build or rebuild every time for the same functionality. And I'm gonna use this example from Carbon again to explain why I'm saying this. So this is a template of a form design. So you see it consists of the heading, the subheading, the fields that serves different purposes, like naming, group selection, text input, and a call to action. And these numbers, they're used to mark the details and usage of these components. So when it comes to, for example, hierarchy change, all of these components, they can be interchangeable between each other. And more importantly, all these components, they can also be replaced by other components that will end up with a completely different form. So currently it's creating a new workspace form, but we can easily change it into probably a customer survey or address form very easily. So really the construction of this framework, it's one time, but it can be adapted in so many variants or different functionalities that serves different use cases in the future. All right, so you see that I have put this upwards arrow on the right side in terms of to compare these 4 layers from design requirements to foundation to UI elements and components, and then to patterns. So you see that the more downwards it is, the earlier that you have to make the decision. And also, on the other hand, the more abstract, the more stabilized and unique the element will be. On the other hand, when it comes to making changes, the more downwards it is, the more impactful your change will bring to the entire design system. And for example, if I make some changes on the design patterns, it will have much less impact than compared with if I make changes on the design foundation. All right, so next section, we're gonna talk about working with the design system. But here I'm gonna hand over to So-Yeon.
Okay, thank you, Yushan. So let me present my screen. Okay, so can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So Yushan went through what design system is and who should be involved and how to create. Now let's talk about how to working with the design system. So when it comes to design system, the collaboration really matter. As you see from the who should be involved, there's a lot of teams involved in the design system. But there are, I can say, the 2 main groups. One is a co-working group. The other one is the the group that has an influence on design system. Let's take a look. Sorry. So as a co-working group, there's a designer and developer. They are working together to discuss which components and patterns should be created and what components and the patterns are needed to build. So designer created components pattern, developer turning into code. Once the designer developer work is done, now it's move on to QA. So QA check all, checking UI design from the design file and checking accessibility for each component and pattern. And then lastly, they are checking the cross-browser rendering to make sure that your components and patterns look exactly the same across the different browser. Once it's done, it's ready to publish. So as a influencer group, if your company has a digital product, your product manager, product owner, product strategist will be a part of the design system. Also influence and design system contents because they are the decision maker of the design, the product built with the design system. However, design system is not only for the product. If your company has an online presence or is providing service through the online, marketing team and then contents designer should be part of the design system, and then they should be involved in creating the design system as well. For instance, think about the visual asset. All these photographies, illustration, icon, color, tone of voice, sound. These are key elements to the established brand identity, so they should be involved in. So as you can see, design system is just share the languages for all involved members and across a different team. However, design system is only not internal teams. So make sure you're getting feedback from the end customer who will be final consumer of your design system. Make sure they are happy with the experience in your service and your product. So now move on to the maintenance model. I've been seeing a couple of the maintenance model. So one is the centralized model, the other one is the solitary model. There'll be a hybrid model as well, but I've seen centralized and solitary model the most. So let's take a look at centralized model first. So centralized model is used in a bigger company where there is enough resource to set up a dedicated team for design system. So design system squad is here. They are the one actually creating, building, testing out, and publishing all design system content. On the other side, there's a product squad. They are an actual user of the design system. So since they are using design system for creating the product and service, they are able to discover defects or the need for the new component, and also able to suggest the better practice and a change request as well. So this model worked well in a bigger company, and then for scaling up design system, but sometimes it could find the gap between design system squad and then product squad because then design system squad are not actual user of the design system. Now talking about the solitary model, a lot of company and a medium size or agency or even big company, you are the sole designer, and then that might be in this case, this model may be falling to your case. So designer and engineer and QAs are working together and in the same team. You are the creator and builder of the design system content as well as a consumer of the design system. Good things about this model is that you can collect the feedback from the user testing and directly from user, as you can reflect on these changes on your design system and right away. So they are actually creating the new component, best practice suggestion, documentation, and then also review and releasing and even consulting. They're handled by the one team. So I found that in this model, process takes much quicker because the relationship and the communication happen more often than the other cases. And when you're looking at it, so marketing team and content strategists involved in the initial creation, but later on they'll be more consumer of the design system. So what I want to emphasize it here is that if you're a sole designer and then you feel overwhelming, thinking about design system maybe seems overwhelming, but I want to emphasize that it's doable and manageable. So now we are talking about design system as a living document. So we say that design system is a living document. What does that mean? Of course, since it needs an update from time to time, it's not set to stone, it makes sense. But what other cases it's referring to? So these are the design system screenshot from the different, they are all the contains a different structure, a little bit of differences contents as well, in order to based on their goal for the design system. So on the right, I list them some of the case when do you have to really, the design system has to be updated and then considered as a living document. So first thing is then you look and feel of the brand and product. If your company has a digital products, probably there'll be a constant update, UI changes happen. Once this happens, take a look at your design system and then just keep it updated. As well as in the brand. In brand cases, and after certain years later, it goes through the rebranding process. In that case, you have to take a look at all the visual parts and tone of voice, all these elements related to the branding part, you need to take a look at and update it as a designer. Second is the digital product and business portfolio expansion. So this case is that I can refer to the project that I'm currently working on. Initially, customer looking at the platform for internal user, but then now they're expanding business to the end customer. So they need a portal for end user, the customer. But those two platforms are completely different, and it serves a different goal, different purpose, and providing different experience as well. Based on that, it's broke down to the story and the flow to the pattern to the components level. I'm starting actually creating the new contents for the design system and updating it. The second point is it really interesting is that since pandemic started, a lot of business moved from physical to the online digital space. So, but in the digital space, it's very competitive, and how that making my brand stands out and unique. So it might be at the beginning a little bit of an investment, but however, having design system help you to establish your brand identity. And the next one is an MVP to mature product. Yes, it's very obvious, isn't it? So when it comes to the MVP, initially it supports the very core then experience and the functionality and the flow. So there will be minimum the set of the UI components, the patterns are needed. But once the product has become mature, it supports the various flows and experience. So based on that, designer and developer have to review what components are needed, what is not, and then keep updated. The last one is a very interesting that localization to globalization. So when starting from the North American market and moving into South America or then in the global market, you should consider the cultural and customer significance. It could be some sort of color, the sounds, wording, also like a mental model differences as well. It's not simply updating design system, but it requires researchers to understand what works or not. I can give you some example of my cases. Like I create a platform with the English, then it translates into the French and other language. Then because I didn't realize that how much amount actually required for those different languages, so-called the text expansion. So it literally break the design layout. The another thing, an interesting article I read a few days ago is that once the Amazon launched their Amazon app, and then they found that users are not really using search option, and then they didn't know why, and they just conducted a little research, and then it says that a lot of people in India didn't realize that the search option and the icon search is not actually search. It means like a ping pong racket or something. So it associated different image and different objects, so didn't realize that that was a search option. So the Amazon fixed the design that put those icons into the search bar and then solve this issue. So think about those cases and do the research, updated your design system accordingly. So now we're talking about best practice. And since design system constantly evolving, what's the best practice to keep it up? This is a very straightforward, right? Keep it simple and concise. Your design system is consumed by many people from different departments. So let's keep it simple and then maybe concise text. And what is important also, including the use cases, when to use, best practice, if it's a UI pattern or a component, include an anatomy as well. And I found that emphasizing on more like a best practice when to use rather than not to use, it helps it in more focusing on the where to use. It's more clear that when it comes to the actual using of the design system. The second one is to follow design standard and principle. That's like the same thing. If you're a designer, you follow the design standard. Principle is actually from different from product and principle. It's a design system tactic and design system to share the purpose. So depending on this principle, your design system may be a more flexible or rigid. So third one is the embrace constraint. I said constraint, but maybe I think the consideration might be the better words to describe. So accessibility, no brainer. Even component level, your components should pass the accessibility requirement. And the framework is you just asking your developer what framework you use to develop this in your platform, or what platform will be used, what language it will be used for your design system. So avoid the situation that developer have to code and custom code, because that's actually defeat the purpose of the design system, right? And the first one is to cultivate a habit of using design pattern and then build a pattern library. This is great for not only just ensuring the customer experiences through the different platform, also it prevents design error. Shame to actually admit it, but very early on stage, and I actually making a mistake that, creating design screens with only the components. So obviously it created inconsistency of it or some confusion to the developer. Since then, I started, making a pattern for the actually UI design. So make a habit of it. The last one is a regular review with the keep up with the design system, updated and minimize and eliminate design debt. So as your products are getting mature, there'll be some sort of the design depths growing and sitting in your design system. But once imagine that you have a new employee and then new designer joining your company and project, and then the person is didn't know and use this case it. Then finding this error and the fixing error might be very costly. So definitely avoid that. So in order to do that, you can use that Excel spreadsheet like this image on the left, on the right, or you can use just simply Trello board and Jira, whatever works for your team. Use and document to keep track of your design system contents as well. The last one, raise a ticket, design and review, develop a code and test it before using it. Key point here is just going through the valid process. And so make sure everyone is aligned and ready for use. Now, as we said, we created our design system. And so we would like to share some tips for the small team. If you're a one-person design team, totally fine. Let me share our tip with you. So start small, discuss about what do we have right now, and what was it really needed, and what components a pattern really need to support, customer goal or the experience. Once that is clear, start talking to developer and QA. So set up the workflow and then discuss with them, involve with them. And you don't need to actually create a design system right away, 1 to 10, but because build your design system content as you go. And every time you feel need of the different patterns and then components, discuss with the developer and in terms of necessity, and then make sure these components supporting the customer experience that you're creating, and the products, the functionality it is supporting is mandatory for supporting that functionality. By doing so, you'll be able to stay organized and focused. So it's not something like totally exceptional, I admit that, but it is possible. And then I just want to say that don't be overwhelmed by that. So I want to discuss talking about our design system approach. So you can see the little bit of this code, right? When you wish to make a apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. Do you? this is a very funny, hilarious that what we actually thinking of to talk about it. And what we want to say is that, I mean, in our experience, you don't need to start from scratch. And then throughout our experience, and we found our way to build it. So if you are thinking about your own, our design system approach may be helpful for you. So let's talk about our design system approach. We did have a problem. First of all, assess the current situation. And we have a problem that we design and develop from scratch, even similar use cases. We didn't have a repository for the design and development, the centralized place for design and then development code. So process was very time consuming, although we did have a design handoff, but once you have an entire team as a changes, so new team actually take upon the project, it was a hard to find it. And then it was like kind of the disconnection between them. So we started asking this question: how about we change our work process in order to focus on more important tasks instead of recreating the same design and then developing pretty much the same pages and then flow. Then we started looking at the open sources. So open sources are great because they already tested out and then a lot of companies are using it and then it is proven. But then is it suitable for our need? So some point we ended up the situation developer had to create and write a custom code, which we try to avoid. So we feel we needed more like some different design system that's suitable for our need and our work. Especially we are working with the clients. So we needed some sort of different direction for our design system. So what was our direction for our design system? The flexibility and then customization. So how might we document and store in our design components and patterns in more flexible and then customizable way? So this is a little snapshot on the right. Those images are a little snapshot from our design system. As you can see, it's totally unbranded. And then there's a lot of the different styles supported. If you have a brand and a product, you don't need this many. But by having these all variables already set up already, for us, depends on the client's style guide and brand, we can quickly just build upon the design system for the specific brand and for the company immediately using the already existing component. So from next page, the Yushan will explain the adaptation and the configuration in terms of how to use our design system. I'll hand it over to you, Yushan.
Thank you so much, Soyan. So yeah, here is the same diagram that we have just gone through together. And really for our design system approach, what we're trying to do is, I would see it as building for the future. So here we have created the design elements and components in a way that includes as much possible design styles and keep them stay open-ended. And also, on the other hand, accessibility, compliance, and also the layout and grid settings will probably stay common in most of the cases. That's why we have kind of started with these two perspectives. And so then if you move one more. So here for a digital experience, we need to do this to adopt from our, I would call it as our master design component. So the same layer logic as I just explained, we take the brand standard and create the design principles. Then the next move, so yeah. So then we do the configuration in the design styles to the visual directions that fits the product. So after all of this are done, we do the deployment to from the design styles to all the elements and components, and only the selected styles will remain. By this, I mean that we have created so many styles and have them open-ended, but we only select and pick whatever styles that we want to keep for this specific design system. So on top, design patterns will, on the same way, created according to the use cases. Well, the common ones like the login form or I don't know, card summary could be reusable all the time. So if you move to the next, so here I just have this example because I know that by describing it, it will still sound a little bit abstract. So in terms of adopting from the design system, the first thing is to do the style configuration. So we take the brand color as a primary color usually. And of course, it has to pass the contrast rate. Then we adapt it into different shades to support the usage of the colors. Then the next step is the shape configuration, because we have considered so many styles, like if it goes rectangular or curved corner or completely rounded. So if the button grows with the text or it will stay on fixed width, etc. But for a consistent experience, we do not use all of these options. So we select the rounded shape, for instance, and therefore we decide on the copy strategy then. So whether we're going to go with text only or use a combination of text and icon, and also consider the placement of the icon if we decided to go with a combination option. So yeah, so coming to the pattern, this is a typical product details tile or card, which we usually call it. So it will have a hero image, a heading, a table underneath, and a CTA. So we can easily use this same skeleton to modify it and also adapt it in so many different ways. So here is an example. All right, so to sum up, I would like to go back to my cooking metaphor because I love it. So our design system approach is like a super restaurant in which you just basically name the dish and we cook it for you. And the configuration is like you selecting whether you want to go something Italian, Mexican, or Japanese, and then tell us your preference, like if you would go with heavy or light on the taste. So in this way, our design system becomes a master recipe book, which we use to produce other recipe books out of it. Also, next, yeah, it comes to super effective and seamless when the design, dev, and QA teams has already worked on the design system prior to a project. So in that way, we are already aligned on most of the components and experience design in most of the cases, for sure. And the third one will be from dev perspective, they are benefited from the fact that the components are already coded in different standards like React and Angular, which they will just pick and use with the minimum changes required. All right, so yeah, this is a interesting section. So we thought that before wrapping up, So-Yeon and I had some thoughts around design system for sure that we thought it could be shared here as well. So first, WIREFRAME. I'm not sure about you, but maybe you can tell us in the chat window, but my personal experience is that I haven't been working on a WIREFRAME for a long term because probably we use wireframes mostly to quickly explore concepts in order to visualize the screen without too many details. But actually with design system, it actually enables us to skip this step and directly jump from the story to high fidelity mockups for most of the cases. And for sure, there will be some like very rough hand sketches involved in the middle, but yeah, but for wireframes, I've been missing it for a long time. So yeah, share your thoughts in the chat window and maybe we can discuss later in the Q&A session and also maybe offline. Yeah, so another thought is around the future design system, how it will evolve. So we have already seen different interfaces emerge with new technology and 5G. So looking from, for example, responsiveness perspective, the future interfaces will expand from the screens to, I don't know, almost everywhere. It could be floating in the air, 360-degree, or even go spatial. So how it could change the way we think and build our design systems in the future. Also, in terms of interaction, moving from click-based only, our input method can be motion, gesture, and voice. So I think, So-Yeon, you have something to share in terms of voice on the next slide.
So this is the last slide of our presentation. So in terms of it, what content we should be included, what guideline we should be included in the future design system. So I picked this topic because the conversational UI is everywhere and chatbot voice assistants are pretty common these days. So I just want to bring up this topic and open to discussion. So what I see is that the product manager, they consider the voice assistants or the product as it's just a feature or it's just a simply independent product. But I think the conversational UI voice assistants can be part of the communication channel for brand because the interaction between customer and the assistant are one-to-one. So it is a great opportunity to contribute your design, contribute to your brand identity. So think about it. If the GUI cases, the shape and colors are presenting the brand identity, but here your dialogue and then the dialogue that has a personality of your brand, actually it's presenting to your brand. So it's considered like, creating dialogue as you're creating the persona of your brand, and then this person is talking to actually the customer. So the creating dialogue should be based on again, the persona, right? That reflect on your brand, and that's it important. So in this way, you can even create some sort of the more or less a personalized experience to your customer. And then sound as well. Like you don't need to really talking about how Windows operating system sounds and an iOS, or even for me, it's a McDonald's. I hear it from even distance. I immediately recall the brand right away, right? So we can be more paying attention to those parts, and then somehow we can think of the best practice, and then maybe it should be in our included in our future design system. Second one is the context, because these are systems and interactions that happen in a different environment. And in some cases they are on the street or in a home, but it's be very busy, or some people in the car. So surrounding is a much different from. So one of the questions I have and I've tried to finding is that what was the best way to actually set up the guideline to accommodate these use cases and then ensure the experience is great. Well, I can say that, very minimum level, you have user has a control of the volume, and then, but I think there might be much more than that. And the view for multimodal interaction. So what it is a multimodal interaction is that you created a programmed and voice assistance program and deploy it in a multiple devices. For instance, think about the Google Home. Some device has a screen, it's supporting a physical interaction. Some has only just a speaker. So in that case, how do you accommodate and making the different providing the different experience. Also think about it, when you're just talking to speaker only, dialogue is the only way they can actually understand and carry the conversation. But if you have the Google Home has a screen, not only the way, but displaying the answer on the screen. So it gives you some sort of alternatives to complete the conversation. So it created somehow the diversifying the experience and how to accommodate all this, and then how to set up the best practice. This is another thing that we need to take a look at when it comes to conversational UI, and then how to putting into our design system. The last one is the accessibility inclusive design. So I'm still learning a lot about the accessibility and different devices, and then I have just a few bullet points that I can address here. So I'm really here from somebody else as well. So what I can say is that accessibility wise, when you are creating dialogue, make it short, and then if possible, use plain English, because it helps the customer understand what an assistant said, and it create the response is more immediate, and as well as they understand the intention. So the other one is the, if you're creating the chatbot, make sure that your contents, I mean, the text is actually, even make it a little bigger or even just more distinctive the color contrast. It's giving more color contrast as well. So these are one. And then also when you think about it, not everyone is good at English and also sometimes and have some sort of a speech impairment. In that case, probably maybe just you have to work with the data scientist and also the developer, make sure that how do you accommodate and then these cases, and then maybe through even launching your voice assistance program, go through the numerous iteration and test it to make sure that accessibility and then guaranteed inclusive design. So these are all have our webinar, and then now it's just open to your question, and thank you again for joining.
All right, thank you so much, Yushin and Su Young, for that. That was fantastic. I'm going to ask you two ladies to put your cameras on and join me here. We have quite a few questions. It looks like we have an incredibly smart audience today. In fact, I'm just going to let everybody know now, in the event that we did not get to your question, please feel free to follow up and we will do our best to answer it. This is usually my favorite part of the event. I'm a little mad at you, Yushin, for all the food references, especially at a webinar over the lunch hour.
I do apologize.
That's okay. So I'm going to get started. Off the bat, we have in no particular order. What resources would you suggest for decision makers to build their capacity to review and evaluate design systems?
That's a good question. Yeah, in terms of resources, I would say that in order to, I would translate this question into my, I don't know, more of a buy-in question. So in terms of resources, it's always good to have some professional in terms of design, also testing and development, both of these perspectives to be able to evaluate the benefit of having a design system, as I think we have illustrated in one of our slides with all the benefit that's in a format of numbers to get the leadership or the decision makers to understand more in terms of how this exponential different that design system could bring to the team.
Okay. Also adding into Yushan's answer, so if you are one person, you really have not much of the resource to dedicate for these cases, then I guess that documentation, obviously, it doesn't depend, that doesn't need to be in a specific program, but have record of your design system. And then if you build upon a little testing like the screen or platform, test it out and then keep documenting, getting the feedback. And then whether this your platform, whether it works well, customer perceive the way you intend to, this is a great, and then you give a mark, and then this is design system really work for you, your organization. That's the I can think of. And so I just don't want to emphasize, you don't need to have a huge resource to actually to create a design system and review it.
That's one thing I really liked about the presentation was you guys didn't just speak about, you know, enterprise grade level. You know, you really said from a single designer to, you know, a large team, there really is value for everybody in a design system. So speaking of obviously design systems and teams, how does your team decide what components make it into the master core library of components?
So yeah, as we just explained, our approach is a little bit different because our team collaboration, I would describe it as more closely, and also we were having the ambition that we want to include possibly every possibility. So really at the initial stage, we had a whole list of the components and elements that we want to build in our design system. And we're trying to also refer to some online platforms, like we have checked so many libraries, like even from Angular and React for sure, and also some open source libraries to collect as much styles as possible. So yeah, we're literally having the design team to work on each of the items that's on the list one by one. Yeah, so that's how we decided to have like the elements, what to include, what not to have in our design system.
So adding a little more into Yushan, so we saw that all the design we created and what was the user experience, what's the flow of it, and what was the mandatory experience. So by one side referencing what is existing, but we take a look at what we have and then strip down all the components and patterns and then breaking into even the very bottom level. And then that we decide to rebuild what is really needed for creating for our future project, and then what was the components, the patterns are commonly used. So those considerations are all included, and we work together and come down to our design system.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, what should we do? I've got a lot here. I'm trying to see what if I can get the best one. This one should be pretty short. Do you work in Figma or Sketch or something else? I know this answer, but I'm going to let you guys do it.
Figma, we love
Yeah,
Figma.
we love Figma. Figma is fast.
Yeah, we are quite the fans of Figma here. We've even created our own plugin.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, just to add to this question, in terms of documentation, we do both on Jira for the detailed tracking, and for the element specs and description, we use the embed feature that's in Figma.
Okay. Who creates the UI guidelines and asset libraries for large design systems? Is it a full team or just an experienced individual?
Chris, can you repeat the question?
I told you we had a really smart audience. Who creates the UI guidelines and asset libraries for a large design system? Would it be a full team or an experienced individual? So essentially, is it a team or an individual who would be responsible for it?
I think it should be a team, right? And then sadly, I never really created a design sort of the bigger team or the many like bigger scale, but it should be then a shared responsibility, because it should be they are all working to create it and experience the product for a customer. So they have to be involved. The process is very collaborative. It is also a co-creation session, co-creative process. So it should be not individuals that one person's in a decision. It shouldn't be one person's the responsibility either. So
right. Yeah, so it's usually, I would say it usually starts really divergent, because in the initial stage, you have so many decisions to make, and the more people and opinions that you involve, the more like meat you get out of the discussion. So really the collaboration between teams, I would say not only design teams, and also from business, from marketing, from actually every team, you need to get the input from there, because they are the persons who understand maybe the users more or the business part more. So yeah.
Okay, I like this one mostly because they seem to be very polite and they've already apologized. It's the first word. So the question is, sorry if you answered this, but does your design system have a product roadmap?
as a design system, as a product, yes, we do have a product roadmap. So it's based on necessity, and then based on what project we have been working on, we know what components. Usually we don't really create a pattern, because it is affected by client's decision and their style guide and brand direction. But components level, we created all this. So we do have a product roadmap as a design system, as a product, but we do not own any digital product in our own company. So in that point, we do not have.
Okay, anything to add, Yushin?
No, I think Soyeon has covered it.
Okay, well then I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but unfortunately we are all out of time. And we do have quite a few questions outstanding, so please, I encourage you to write in, and I will pester these ladies to answer your questions as best as they can. While it does seem like we're out of time, I wanted to thank both Soo-Young and Yushin for taking their time out of their busy schedules to share their knowledge on design systems. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We hope you found it interesting. I know I did. I certainly learned some things, and I hope you all did too. Again, we had so many great questions, so please follow up and do your best, and we'll do our best to try and get them answered for you, as well as a recording of this webinar will be available on our website in about a week or two after we are done here, available for download. And you can always check out our upcoming webinars on our social media feed. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care and have a great rest.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a great
you.
day.
Bye.
Bye.